My name's Hamja Ahsan. I've become an accidental human rights activist for political prisoners and many people oppressed under war and terror measures, and also for civil liberties within Britain, given that we live in a time in which many of our basic civil liberties are being stripped away. I was an artist and curator, and somehow I've sort of sacrificed a lot of my career in order to sort of devote myself to become a public advocate for political prisoners. It's all started the day in which the police came and raided my house, in this house which I'm speaking now, in February 2006. And I can't describe how humiliating and terrifying and bizarre that experience was, as I thought these things didn't happen within what you call liberal Western democracies. I thought this is what happens in these far off away lands. And seeing police officers come into my room, take away things like my nephew's cartoons, my diary, my mobile phone, my CD collection, and God knows with my obscure taste in music what they'll make of that, as some sort of transatlantic terrorism raid. And still many years later, over 7 years later, we've got nothing back. That moment changed my life forever, and that moment radicalised me and pivoted me into action. And before, I used to just be like a sort of Guardian reading armchair liberal who read the odd Noam Chomsky book, but then I became like an organiser and activator and a catalyst, as I saw many people didn't realise these things happen. And it still shocks people when I tell them what happened to my family, that people can be detained without charge or trial within this country for up to 14 years or 6 years or 7 or 9 or 8. You know, these are the longest times in British history, longer than like Northern Ireland's internment or administrative detention in Palestine, and all within, you know, nice cosy England. My family lived in Tooting most of their lives. My brother grew up here. There's a lot of families actually from Tooting who have actually been affected by the war on terror. So you had Baba Ahmed, who was my brother's co-defendant in the extradition, who is the longest detained without trial British citizen in British history, unprecedented. And Shaka Ahmed's family, who in Guantanamo Bay, and actually one of the first people to visit my mum when Dalla was extradited was Shaka Ahmed's wife and kids. I thought that was really touching, how they'd been through so much unjustified trauma and illegal trauma, and yet they still had this ability to still care for others, and I was really touched by that. Because there's a lot of fear and prejudice and indifference, and you have to be face to face with that. And it's astonishing, you know, when people are undergoing solitary confinement, torture, and being subject to all these oppressive measures, the level of cowardice, you know, some of which is from the Muslim community. Some of our best supporters are Christians or atheists or Buddhists. A lot of the Tooting Muslims are too cowardly to associate or speak up for you. That always hurts, never stops hurting. But it's something you have to live with. Before this extradition request from the United States was placed on my brother's head, and he was detained without trial, and none of us actually went to the United States or even set foot there, so it was bizarre. He was actually one of the early campaigners for the closure of Guantanamo Bay, and in some ways I see myself as continuing a lot of the work he did. And in some ways we don't realise that Guantanamo begins at home. You know, before all this happened to me, I didn't realise I actually had a level of faith within Parliament and media and the trappings of liberal democracy, and then you see systematically they've just wronged so many people. Like when you have people like Christopher Older, whose brother, who was a British soldier, who was killed by police, and so many years later, you know, you're still not arriving at truth and justice. and there's all these family campaigns, like the sister of Christopher Older, Janet, who are quite inspirational and have this perseverance and persistence and quest for truth that I draw inspiration from. I found a lot of my art background came into the advocacy and activism, and it was creativity that came into a lot of that distinguished my campaign from a lot of other Muslim prisoner campaigns. And also because my brother was an award-winning poet, producing a lot of his best writing, some in solitary confinement, some in group isolation, tragically even projected on the Royal Festival Hall whilst he was in solitary confinement in America. So there was this added level of sensitivity, and also the community in which I belonged to, where there were loads of things like participatory art and performance and filmmaking that came into the sort of art practice too, and how I'd re-look at these cases of injustice, and how you can develop forms of soft power and develop a public understanding of law and civil rights using these creative methods. And we got shortlisted for a Liberty Human Rights Award this year, which was very flattering to be recognised by this sort of big national organisation. But you know, all these sort of liberal NGOs like Amnesty and Liberty, they come on very late in the game. You think of the Angola Free, they weren't supported by Amnesty until very late, or Troy Davis, who was about to receive the death penalty. It was his sister carrying these campaigns forward, and their families. Many people were really outraged by the way Bradley Manning was treated prior to his trial, which is being put in this type of isolation. What they don't realise is there are like 80,000 other people in America in solitary confinement. It's almost like the last form of legalised torture nobody talks about. 30,000 prisoners went on hunger strike in California last year, which nobody noticed. Some of them hadn't even touched their own relatives for like decades. I didn't know about any of these things. I didn't know there were kids as young as 13 in solitary confinement. I didn't know there were like mentally ill people who'd had their cells gassed out, and Theresa May's gone on to do worse things. And over 50% of suicides in the US prison system occur in solitary confinement, while only being 3% of the population. And you can't, once you learn all these things, it sort of transforms your outlook generally, and you can't really turn back or stay quiet.